become most alive in our deepest areas of pain if we choose to go there vulnerably and openly and sort of almost stubbornly believing that God truly is the love that He says He is.
This is Down to Earth Conversations, where we hear from ordinary people who are helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. Kia ora! Welcome to episode 100 of Down to Earth Conversations with me, your host, Andy Dixon. This podcast began as a fleeting thought way back in 2019, and here we are 100 episodes in. Apparently, more than half the podcasts ever made don't have more than 10 episodes, so I'm thrilled that Down to Earth Conversations is still going strong, that I'm still having wonderful people say yes to a kōrero with me, and that you all are still choosing to listen. It really does mean a lot. As I was thinking about what to do for episode 100, I thought, why not talk to someone who has featured more on the podcast than anyone else, yet who hasn't actually been on the podcast? Every episode since episode 21, Strahan Coleman's music has been there. And in this kōrero, Strahan and I go deep, talking about the journey that led him to be an award-winning musician who travelled the world, but then the way that life all came crashing down, pulling his music career out from under him and challenging everything about his life and his future. In that time of deep pain, Strahan began to learn a new way of seeing God, a new way of praying, a new way of being. We talk about the mountains and the valleys, the joys and the struggles, the unlearning and the embodying of faith. We talk about unanswered prayers, undiagnosable conditions, and what it might mean that God is good, especially in those times when it doesn't seem to be true. Regular listeners will know that at the end of each conversation, we hear the intro to Hello Heaven by Strahan, and Strahan has graciously said that we can play the whole song. So at the end of my kōrero with Strahan, we'll hear the whole of his song Hello Heaven, and we're really grateful to Strahan for that. It is a conversation that's filled with life and hope. This is episode 100 of Down to Earth Conversations. Here's Strahan Coleman. It is my absolute pleasure to be sitting with you for this kōrero today, Strahan. Kia ora, welcome to the podcast.
Kia ora, my friend. It is an absolute pleasure to see you again and to be on the podcast. Thanks for having me.
And we were saying just before we started recording that this is going to be episode 100 and that you've actually, with your music, you've been on the podcast more than anybody else.
Yeah.
And yet this is your first time on the podcast. So it
Dude.
is really good to have you here.
Thanks, man. I'm honored to be on for the big 100, man.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's a good effort, dude. That's pretty amazing.
That's pretty exciting. For those who haven't come across you before, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, yeah. Well, I am a artist, writer, coffee-loving, dad joke-telling beach bum who lives in the Coromandel. I got 3 kids. We live here in Tairua, which is basically paradise, and don't move here though. But it is paradise. We'll keep it to ourselves, like a bunch of weirdos.
Yeah. And how many people live in Tairua?
Dude, it's like 1,600.
Yeah, cool.
It's small, man. And yeah, I spend my time. I'm a writer. I love writing using words. I love music, and I spend my time with people, journeying with them into sort of the deep places of their souls and processing what it means to live a human life, really, like to rediscover ourselves as souls and to really thrive in that space. I love that. That involves prayer, helping people with prayer and communion. But I think it's more than that. It's like helping people rediscover what it means to exist, which I guess sounds really deep, but that probably says a lot about me too.
Yeah.
I am unquestionably fierce at going deep fast. So
Yes.
you can
Yeah.
imagine how much I hate parties where everyone likes small talk. This is my worst nightmare.
True. True.
I usually corner someone and I'm like, you look like the right person. And I'll try and talk to them for an hour while they shuffle away, say with excuses like, oh, I need to get a drink or I need to go to the toilet or something like that.
Yeah. Introverts of the world unite.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds so like me. We spent a bit of time together in church back in the day.
Yeah.
And I remember I was playing with my band Calling Elijah. We were playing music, traveling around youth groups and churches and playing and preaching and things like that. And I remember you coming up, you were writing, folky, psalmy kind of songs at the time. And you were real passionate. You were also like developing your preaching craft. And I remember you coming and having a conversation with me saying, I just want to get out there and play my music and talk to people and, share about God and how do I do that? And, I can't remember what I said, to be honest, but it must have been profound because,
Oh, yeah. Life changing.
Because next minute you were traveling the world with your music and preaching and winning Gospel Album of the Year at the New Zealand Music Awards. Tell us a bit about that part of your journey. What was that part of your journey like?
Yeah, I mean, I actually remember that time. Man, that was a tough time. I've always had this kind of simultaneous love for the arts and for ministry, and that's not a very easy tension to hold. At least it wasn't back then. I think it's better now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd sort of spent a bit of time in ministry. It didn't really go great for me. And yeah, at that time, there's a lot of artists around, and you were one of them. And I was just like, man, I really want to do this thing. And honestly, you just ask any musician, any manager, anyone, and everyone's just like, I don't know, just get out there and do it. It's the most
totally.
unhelpful. Like, if you want an actual career, like music sucks, man. Basically, everyone's like, you're not going to get paid. No one's going to like it. It's going to cost you everything, but just go out there and do it. You're like, go do what?
Yeah.
So I just started doing, I just started writing my songs and doing living room shows, actually. And that was sort of back when living room shows weren't really so much of a thing. They were just starting out. And so I just said to myself, well, I want to get great at my craft. I want to be with people. I'm just going to do as many shows as I can. I think that maybe that year after I talked to you, I went and did like 87 shows or maybe 9. No, it wasn't. It was 130 shows the next year,
Wow.
just doing living rooms and everything I could find. And I think in doing those events, I fell in love with story. I think what I learned to do was to play songs. And because in a living room, you've got maybe sometimes 5 people if the show goes really bad, or maybe like 30 or 40. It's not big crowds. And you can't sit in someone's house and just perform. Do you know what I mean? You've got to be human. You've got to connect. And so I feel like I did these years of living room shows and I fell in love with story. I fell in love with human beings. I fell in love with genuine connection. And so after that, I just did that around the world. I did it in America, in Australia, in Europe, and I would just do shows anywhere and everywhere. It wasn't really like, I never did churches. I did bars and cafes and music festivals, and I would play my folk songs and I would tell stories and sleep at whoever's couch would let me afterwards, and we'd eat together, and I'd hear from people all over the world, and we'd go deep, and my introverted self absolutely loved it. And so I did that for like, maybe 7 years. I'm really, really lucky to have been able to do that, and it was a bit of a dream for me.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite memories of that period of time?
Well, I got to draw a few in. I mean, they range from everything from, I got invited to do a living room in Los Angeles, and I didn't find out until the night before that it was in Compton in South Central Los Angeles. and I'm like staying at this family's house, and they're like pleading with me. They're like, please don't go. It's like, you're going to get shot. And I was like, I don't know, man. So I rung the person who booked me, and I was like, hey, man, I just realized like you're in Compton, and is this really safe? And they were like, yeah, totally. Nothing ever happens. It's super safe. Anyways, I turn up and do the show. Goes really well. Like 50 people, backyard, pontoon lights, everyone's singing the song. Festoon lights, everyone's singing the song. And then afterwards, I'm like, I don't know why I was so worried about coming here. Like South Central LA is a rep. And they're like, oh, yeah, no, nothing ever happens here. And then one person was like, oh, actually, like last weekend, we were locked inside for 48 hours while a SWAT team was like circling our house because this murderer had just escaped and was like shooting people. And I was like, oh, okay. And they're like, oh, actually, come
Oh,
to
wow.
think about it, last Thursday, our whole road was shut down by a gang and they were just like, selling drugs and wouldn't let the cops in and all this kind of stuff. And by the end of it, I was like, it actually kind of sounds like it's not really that safe, guys. But I loved it. Like, that was
Yeah.
amazing. So it would range from stuff like that to playing, 3-story beautiful theaters like the Civic in Auckland opening up for Josh Garrels to thousands of people getting standing ovations and just tears in the audience, right through to, I had this one experience where I stayed the night with, and this is what I loved probably the most, was that people would put us up in their houses, we'd hear their stories. And one night, this one person, and I'd had a bit of an awkward experience with them. I thought I'd confirmed that I was staying, and apparently I hadn't. And they rang me. I was like, I text them to say, I'm on my way. I'll see you in a couple of hours. And they text back being like, dude, you never confirmed. Like, we're not expecting you and all this kind of stuff. I'm in like Los Angeles. And I didn't know them from a grain of salt. It was a hookup through a friend. So they were super angry. And I got there and it was awkward and it was just super weird. But then on like night two, after I did a living room show, they stayed up and we talked. And it turned out that they just had a really difficult past. Their father had tried to kill them when they were a kid, and just
Wow.
terrible abusive situation. And we just started sharing love with her and listening to her, and she just kind of burst into tears and wept for hours. And we just got to like share love with her, pray for her, care for her. Yeah, drama, absolutely dramatic moment it was.
I just had some dramatic piano music as my cat jumped on the piano. Anyway, that's cool, man. Like I love when you get to do that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, it's cool to stand up on stage and to play and to do that stuff that you love.
Mm,
But the connections that you make and the seeing people for who they are,
mm,
that's pretty
mm.
special.
It's massive, man.
And the whole I love that whole storytelling dynamic that
Mm,
you fell in love with telling stories, and that even came through in your music. Your music
mm,
is storytelling, but
yeah.
then you also, the music gave you a chance to do your storytelling
Mm,
in
mm.
other ways as well, which is, yeah, it's pretty cool. And it was so cool to kind of watch and observe as we were kind of winding things down. You were ramping things up, and
Yeah.
yeah, so cool to watch. And then
Thanks, man.
suddenly it all changed for you. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I came back from a tour in Germany, which in many ways was like the mountaintop experience for me. I was getting like 3 or 4 encore repeats after every show. Like, it was just musically amazing, so many incredible moments with people that were just rich and deep. And I came back from that tour. I mean, I think I'd been feeling this for maybe a few years. I think really looking back, I can see it from when I was a teenager, but my body wasn't doing well. And you just don't know what's normal and what's normal. And I don't think I ever really talked about it a ton because I just thought everyone felt the way I did, daily headaches and fatigue and things. But I came back from this tour, and maybe the pressure of that travel and things had really hit me. And I got sick. I got real sick, probably burnout, but maybe a lot more underlying issues, health issues for me. And um, I ended up hitting a physical wall and spending something like 70% of the time out of the next 2 years just in bed, kind of with
Wow.
migraines, headaches, nausea, extreme fatigue. Uh, I got to a point where I was spending a couple of $100 a week on vitamins, thousands of dollars on specialists and alternative health specialists and things, and no one could figure out what was wrong. It's just complete vacancy. And interestingly enough, in that time, I did release another album. I released an album called Out of Exile, which was beautiful. But I was so sick I couldn't even tour it. And probably for the year that came out, I would be like literally getting virus after virus, like terrible, horrific flus and viruses because my immune system was so bad. And I would just get up like sick as a dog, go do a show for like an hour and a half, and then go back to bed basically for 4 weeks, just because of the impact on
Wow.
my body.
Yeah.
And for a while, I could do that. I could sing, um, but it was painful. But really, just my whole life just fell apart. Truly, it did. It was like we ran out of money. I mean, we've been living as missionaries for years, and now I didn't even have the little income I was getting from music. I was sick. We just had our second child, so it was a big deal for us. Katie hadn't worked; she couldn't work because of the kids at the time, and man, it just went from mountaintop to like panic attacks every day to I think I'm dying to doctors can't figure out what's wrong with me to I can't see my friends. I don't see anyone. I'm just lying in bed 16, 17 hours a day. Um, it was heavy, man. Like it really was like hitting a brick wall at 100 miles per hour, and it changed my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you're in that moment where you think, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life, I love this thing. I've had this peak experience, and then it's suddenly stripped away. I can only imagine the sort of emotions that are going through your mind and going through your body, from fear because you don't know what it is and what's happening, to, anger and frustration and sadness and grief, a whole bunch of things going on for you. What was that emotional journey like, particularly as it connected with your relationship with God?
Yeah, I mean, it was a roller coaster, dude. Like, I think I'm a deeply convicted person that lives out of my core beliefs. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've never been the kind of person that just does stuff. I think about everything way too much, and then I live from that. So I think there was a couple of primary issues for me. One was I knew deep down that I'd felt called, and it was evident that I was called to do music. Ever since I was 8, it's like confirmed by everyone around me. I'd had my own personal experiences, and I was doing it, and now I'm sick. So one of the questions was, okay, God, like, didn't you call me to do this? And now, where's the help, mate?
Yeah,
This one
yeah,
issue. So there's
yeah,
that. The second issue is the cognitive dissonance that comes when your personal experience of God or the kingdom is at complete odds with your theology or your sort of frameworks for Him. And for me, that was I'm doing all of this for God, with God. I'm putting my life on the line. I've put my family on the line. I mean, I haven't got into it, but we really gave up everything to do this. Like it was full on eating toast every day, giving all of our money to the ministry, full on stuff. And I was like, had this moment of maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months. It's like we're going through suffering, but a couple of years, you know, it starts to feel like, okay, God, where are you? And I thought you said, if I seek you, I will find you. I thought you said that we can ask and we will receive. I thought you said you were good and loving and compassionate. And it sort of seems to me like you're standing on the sideline watching my life burn, and I've given you everything. So for me, that was probably, I had the mental difficulty, the mental health when your body is sick for that long. Just scientifically, it's basically like say goodbye to your brain. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Brain fog, anxiety, depression. That is what happens when you are sick for long enough. So there's a mental challenge, there's the financial challenge, social challenge. But for me, the real bottom for me was I don't know what this means anymore. That God is good, and that God loves me because He's not healing me, He's not answering my prayers, and I just can't find Him. And so that was desperate for me, man. Like that was existential, and I think for a lot of people of faith, I think I've come to see that that's actually a place we are all going to get to at some point because we all, whether we want to or not, we create these frameworks of for God to fit into. We say, this is what I think God is or who God is and how this works. And we're so limited in our understanding. It's a pretty hilarious we even bother trying, to be honest. And there will come a moment where either God Himself or life itself will shatter that. And that's where we really begin to find who God truly is. And we really begin to find what faith, the actual meaning of the word faith is. And I think that's what began to happen for me in that time was like, okay, if God is good and He doesn't seem good to me right now, then either He's lying or is a lie, well, I need to rediscover what God being good actually means. And that's what I did. I went on a journey of, okay, Lord, I'm here. Help me understand and see what I cannot see, because I am out of ideas here. I'm out of the ocean without a paddle, and you're saying you're good and loving, and I need you to really enter my life and do that. And that's sort of where the story began for me.
Yeah. It's like I think sometimes we've got God in a box, and then
Mm.
God, something happens, and we think, oh, actually, God's bigger than the box that I've got.
Yeah, yeah.
But often,
He's like in this bigger box.
yeah, that's it. It's like sometimes it's just like, oh, we've got a bigger box now, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas what I hear you saying is actually the box wasn't working. There
No.
wasn't a box that worked, and then you
Mm.
were like, well, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
When my boxes don't work, what do we do?
Yeah.
And I know you've talked about it subsequently as
Mm.
that this was an invitation for you,
Mm.
an invitation into a journey, and like you just said, of discovering what it means for God to be good.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, what did you do about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can have these thoughts, but just lying in bed having these thoughts, for me it would just go round and round and round,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
unless you step in and do
Mm.
something. So
Mm.
what does
Mm.
that look like when you're struggling and you're sick and you can't do much anyway?
Well, I mean, for sure, at first, it was like a huge amount of human effort. For me, it was like, I'm gonna freaking make sense of this thing. Like, I'm convinced that, I mean, if you can't control God, right? Which I think everyone at a fundamental level would at least like to affirm theologically, right? That if God exists, he
Yeah.
cannot be controlled by people. So if you feel like you can't control his behavior as being, I think one of the ways we try to domesticate him is by making sense of him. And I think a lot of people think that theology is an attempt to make sense of God. And it's actually our more of our ability to kind of discover him. It's not the same thing. And so I initially went out to make sense of this. I'm going to create mental maps and frameworks that I can then make sense of to bring me some comfort to move on. Okay, so that didn't work. That really didn't work. And so what I did in the end was I kind of began sort of trekking myself off to this Anglican retreat center in Auckland that you could, just stay in for a day for $10. They had a bed, and graciously, I think because they knew my situation, they would eventually just let me turn up, sit in a chair all day, and then go home. And what I did was I let go. I let go of understanding. And I think this has probably been the core takeaway for me is I hadn't realized how much the Enlightenment had infected me. It's actually incredibly arrogant for people to say, unless I understand it, I can't believe it. It basically says, like, I am God. If it doesn't make sense to me, if I can't understand it, then it can't be true or good or real or beautiful, and therefore I'm out. But that's really an Enlightenment hangover that thinks that everything is like you're able to make sense of, and it's just not true. And so I kind of gave up on the project of understanding mentally and gave into the project of experiencing. And so I would just sit by a window and look out and just kind of say, okay, Father, like, I don't get it. And I'm full of anger, and I'm not going to hide or pull punches here. Like, I am who I am. You know what I'm feeling. Like this,
Yeah.
I can't hide it from you.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
nasty. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
rancid. So be with me. That's just what I would say. So just come and be with me. And I would look out a window for 8 hours, and then I'd drive home again. 7 hours, I'd drive home again. Another thing I did in the morning was I would wake up. At that time, my son would get up at about between 3 and 4:30 in the morning. That's just what time he got up for the day. And he would not let you like stay in bed. He would make you get up. So I would get up and make a coffee and sit in bed at like 4 in the morning. Of course, absolutely munted. I'm only getting about 4 or 5 hours sleep. And I would just put my hands open on my palms and say, God, I just receive your goodness and I receive your love. Now, that's to me faith, because at that moment, I couldn't intellectually make sense of either of those things. At that moment, there was no way for me to cognate it. But what I was trying to do is move my experience of God out of my head down into my soul. down into my center. I call it my deep self, like the part of me that's so much deeper than my surface thoughts and sort of my misunderstandings. The same part that we fall in love with, the same part that we long for not to be lonely from, that deeper, almost involuntary existence down below. And I would just say, you know what, God, would your love and goodness fill this place, fill that space, help me to experience that. And I just did that every day. And honestly, I can't say that I had this moment where that just blew my mind and I started levitating and I walked out, shining bright like the sun. But between those two things of learning to just simply exist before God and in his presence, without making sense, and then to consciously every day say, I receive your love and goodness into my body. Over a year or two, I just changed. And my experience of God changed. I found him to be a faithful, quiet friend, not a distant friend, but present in grief.
Yeah.
I found him to grieve with me. I stopped asking why questions. I started asking who questions. Who are you? You know? And I shifted my framework from I need to make sense of God and all these things to I need to be with God. And in that process, discovered that I think I'd got my entire faith back to front, because I think post-enlightened Western Protestantism has made us believe that we think our way to God. And that
Yeah.
sounds outrageous and maybe even simple. I think that's way more true than many of us are afraid to even consciously acknowledge. And so for me, I felt like I got delivered from that, and it's changed my life. And God never told me why I was sick. He's never answered that question. And honestly, I got better for a few years and then got 10 times worse about 3 years ago. Been through it. I'm still sick. I still struggle. I've never had the why question answered, but I've had my entire being reoriented, and I've just never ceased feeling close to him. And I've never ceased feeling the presence of compassion and love. And for that, I'm truly grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk on the podcast about bringing a bit of heaven to earth,
Mm,
finding those spaces where God is at work. And I think you've touched on something really crucial there, which is, often we look for the glamorous, for the magical,
mm-hmm.
and go, that's where God is.
Yep.
But sometimes actually the deepest connection of where God is in the hurt and the pain,
Mm-hmm.
um, being there with us as a comfort,
Mm-hmm.
and and in the others that He puts around us to help along that journey.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
even the people at the retreat centre,
Mm,
offering that space to you,
yeah.
being an example of that. Of that's just like an ordinary thing they could do, but like you said, it's changed your life. So
Mm, mm,
yeah,
mm.
I love all of that. I don't love the pain in all of that.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing. I don't want to say God caused any of the sufferings, but my goodness, God turns up in those spaces when we look.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I love that you were honest about the anger as well. I think so often we domesticate our relationship with God
Mm,
and try and make it
mm.
tame and present it nicely.
Yeah.
But actually, if God's the bigness that we believe, God can handle our anger. And like you say, it's not like you can hide it. um,
Well, and that's the irony, isn't it? That's the irony. I think anything short of complete honesty with God is just performance. I don't know anyone on earth that would say, I feel most happy when I only share with my spouse partially what I'm feeling. You are the most naked with the person you love the most. And it's 10 times more true with God. And I think one of the biggest reasons most people feel God is distant is because most people don't feel like they can be truly honest and vulnerable. And if you don't open up to someone, you can't receive their love into the deepest parts of you. And this is why I think pain is actually the point. I don't think pain is an aberration. I mean, if you want to draw all the gospel into a single point, a single image, it's the crucifixion. It's the greatest act of pain. And I think we're afraid to go into our pain because we feel shame. Do you know what I mean? Like, I felt ashamed that my life had burnt out. I felt ashamed that I was full of so much rage and anger. I felt ashamed that my faith was so weak and I doubted so much. I felt ashamed, you know, and to open that shame to God, to open your deepest shame to God is the greatest risk. If you open your shame to a human and they reject you, you could possibly pass it off as they're just a bit of a dick. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's,
yeah.
but if you open yourself up to a perfect God and he rejects you, where can you go? And so I think in these moments, we have to do two things. We have to brave opening up, but we have to know, we have to have a true image of who God is, that he's not waiting there to kind of be like, oh, I told you so. I knew you were just a dirty, rotten little worm that had nothing good to offer. We have to have the true image of God who just responds in tears and weeping and says, can I sit with you and hug you and show you how much I love you, and let's heal together. And so, yeah, man, I think pain is actually our greatest opportunity, but especially in communion with the divine one, with the divine love, but it has to, we'll only do it if we truly believe he's good. And that's actually an experience. That's not a theological reality, because we grow up with traumatic experiences. We do. We just grow up too often being told that we're not lovable. And we have to start reteaching the reality of what that unconditional love looks like from God, not in a theological sense, but in an experiential one. And so I feel grateful for that. And my other thing I was thinking, just as you were saying, was that if you want to plant a crop, if you want a flourishing crop, do you plant it at the top of the highest mountain or at the bottom of the lowest valley? If you want fruitfulness, if you want vitality, greenery, lush, I'm talking about the soul here now too. You don't go climb up the mountain and plant your fruit trees and corn. There's not enough oxygen. You plant it in a valley. The valley is actually where the water trickles down into the deepest cavities and generates the greatest life. And I 100% think that's the spiritual journey. We become most alive in our deepest areas of pain if we choose to go there vulnerably and openly and sort of almost stubbornly believing that God truly is the love that he says he is. Yeah.
Beautiful. That image just hits home, I think, for me. As someone who, especially in my early 20s, had fallen into that chasing after that mountaintop experience of God. Mm-hmm. And I see it in Christians that they're trying to run from one mountaintop experience to another.
Yeah.
And not notice what's in the valley in between. Mm-hmm. And in fact, trying to escape the valley in between.
Yep.
And yet that's a place where flourishing is present.
Yeah.
And if we follow what you're saying, that we've got that opportunity, that invitation to be in that valley space and to see what grows out of it. I have my mantra for the last few years is a lot less poetic than yours, but as I went through redundancy and a whole lot of other stuff that was really challenging, the thing that I kept saying to myself was, shit makes good fertilizer.
Yeah, great. Awesome.
But, so similar idea, but not anywhere near as poetic. So I like your valley. Yep.
Well, actually, I've come back to that image of composting a lot.
Yeah.
A lot, which is what I hear you're saying.
Yeah, totally. One of the things that came from that time as well was you started releasing prayers, first online and then as volumes of books. So you got 3 of those out, and I just love them. I think.
Oh, thanks, man.
I think they role model some of the stuff you're talking about, of the depth and the questioning, but the questioning isn't the why. It's not the help me understand question. It's the teach me who kind of question, and the,
Yeah.
where can I find you question. And for me, I think that's something that's really important for Christians, is to find prayer in this way that's not about either making a shopping list for God, or trying to get God to do what we want, or trying to get God to teach us so that we understand and we've finally got this Christian thing sorted.
Yeah.
I think some of the ones I love the most are the shortest ones.
Mm.
And knowing your story a little bit too, it feels like I've only got 3 lines today, so I'm going to make them count. Is how some of it feels. Is that what it was like for you?
Yeah, it was. I think there's a few things in the shortness of those writings that I love the most. One, I think the less you say, the more meaningful it is. Two, I think we just say too much all the time. And we think words make things more powerful. More words, more power. Mostly my prayer life and my grasp of God has got more and more silent since then. Because one word like help means more to me than an entire hour of going on about all the things, because I trust him more. And so I think there's a lot of trust in a single line prayer. It's basically like, I know you hear me, and I know you know everything that's gone into every letter in every word of this one sentence. And I trust you to hear that. And so there is that. And then there is just the simply like, I don't have a lot of words. I'm a wreck. I can't make a lot of sense. And if you can't, Father, be in the depth of my soul, hearing those groans more than these few words that I offer, then what hope do I have? And I think a lot of people think the deepest place of prayer is like continuous conscious mental dialogue. But I disagree. I think the deepest place of prayer is pure silence, where your soul is groaning and moving in such a deep way with God down in there that nothing needs to be said. It's felt, it's known. Like sitting with a friend who's just lost someone they love. You don't say anything. You just hold them. You're there. And your silence is fullness. It's not emptiness, it's
Yeah.
fullness. It's, I am with you feeling what you feel. And that is a million times more important than me offering some trite throwaway Christmas card, you know, piety right now. And I think that in those prayer books, what I'm trying to do is invite people down into that, is to
Yeah.
say, let's just pause, just bring our attention with a few words, and then move deeper into that silence, which is not emptiness, it's not quietness, it's the opposite. It's a total fullness of being, with God's total fullness of being, and let's coexist there.
Yeah. And I mean, that makes so much sense to me when you read in the Bible, pray without ceasing.
Yeah.
And if praying without ceasing is just talking to God and more and more words, that's actually impossible.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about is a way of being that is possible to do, not just when we sit down to have our prayer time, but when we're playing with our kids, when we're driving to work, when we're doing our whatever we're doing, can be done in that sense of the fullness of the silence, I think.
Yeah, and I think this is the most radical claim of Christianity. People get so caught up on Jesus dying on the cross and his physical resurrection. They want to get all apologetic about it and get into the historical details. Great, that's awesome. But don't forget that after that, we make this insane state, like theological assertion that he then sends his spirit to live inside of us. That God himself doesn't dwell far off on a throne somewhere, distant from us. He is as close to us as our very own consciousness, as our very own soul in the center of our being. And I think if you really took a moment to think about how radical that is and how offensive that is, like that should offend people because we
Yeah.
are a mess. Do you know what I mean? Like we are
Yeah.
talking about perfect love here, at least on that level. But secondly, I think it changes. Here's why I think that's important. One of the things I've struggled with my whole life is loneliness. Deep and just lone, just lying there, just I am alone. I'm not loved. And I think loneliness is so prevalent in our world.
Yeah.
I think a lot of our anxiety and depression comes from feeling unloved and lonely. And I think one of the greatest ways to bring heaven to earth, consciously, is to help meet that loneliness with this reality that whether you hear words or an audible voice or not, it is possible to be indwelt with God, to intermingle with God, the soul, and to never be alone. And if that's true, then prayer isn't conscious mental dialogue. It's not some kind of like laundry list, although that totally is as well. But deep down, fundamentally, prayer becomes about coexistence, which is so much different to, I'm going to go and kneel for a while and pray. Now it's like, I'm going to live from that deep place with God, with my children, at my work, with my flatmates. Because the same guy who said pray unceasingly also said this, we don't know what to pray. This is Romans in
Yeah.
the Bible, Romans chapter 8. We don't know what to pray. So the Spirit who lives deep within us, he intercedes with groans beyond understanding. So that makes prayer not a conscious intellectual project, but a desire meeting desire project in the depth of us. And I think what this is what grew out of my story was like, oh my gosh, God actually just wants to experience my life with me, through me, in me. And he just wants me to keep sinking down deeper into this reality of who he is so that I'm actually never the instigator of prayer. I'm always second into the conversation. The conversation's always happening. He's always talking, always praying, always alive within me. I'm just the one that's always distracted. And so unceasing prayer is more like, how do I awaken and live from that reality to let him live through me? Oh my gosh, man. Like, talk about turning prayer from a place of exhaustion and work to a place of utter excitement and freedom and liberation and peace and restfulness. And so I think that's why since that, I've really, through the prayer books, through other things, my life's desire has been to help people reach that place and to realize that this gospel, this thing is so much better. It's so much better than we think. And we can live unlonely in stillness and rest and peace, not from like ice baths and doing enough yoga and all the rest of it, but by simply receiving the profound eternal love that made us and then made a way to live in us. And I wasn't preached that gospel when I was early in my faith. I was kind of preached the like, you're going to hell, man. But guess what? This God that wants to send you to hell also sends his son who happens to protect you from that God. That whole thing, it's just a
Yeah.
mess. It's like,
Yeah.
be a good boy and maybe you'll be okay. That's
Yeah.
different. So I think being sick, as hard as it was, and the suffering that I've gone through with chronic sickness, it's finally given me the opportunity to re-dig some of that richness and beauty and to envelop it into my being. And it's just set me on fire. It's just made me just so
Yeah.
alive.
That's
And I'm
so
so
good.
grateful for it.
That's so good. And I hear in that contrast of, what you were taught versus where you are now,
Mm.
that idea of, actually you're going to hell because you're worth nothing, because you're
Yeah.
despicable, and and yet
Yeah.
what you're talking about now is spending time with God because God is pure love, and God has chosen to dwell in us, which means that we are eternally lovable.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you've got a book called Beholding, which has come out
Mm.
of this place of seeing God and dwelling with God, who is this bigness of love,
Mm.
and learning to see that God and appreciate that God.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about that book, and where did that come from? What's the kaupapa of that?
Well, I'd been writing these prayer books for a few years and people seemed to really appreciate them, which was a genuine shock to me. I only actually printed a couple hundred to start with because I thought, who wants to read prayers? I had no exposure to liturgy or anything. I came out charismatic, so I was like, no one's going to like this stuff. But I've written it. I'll put a few hundred out there, and ended up just reprinting and reprinting and reprinting, and it surprised me. So I sat one down during COVID to kind of write a book that was like, here's the life and theology behind that, because the prayer books are pretty devotional and poetic, and they're not like a systematic theology. Not that I even think that should even really exist as a thing, but so I wanted to sort of say, here's my story. Like, this is the brokenness and the wrestle that's come out of, but then also, here are some of the ways that I've learned to pray. Here are some of the reframes that have helped me, that are completely orthodox, by the way. This is nothing that I'm saying, and nothing that I have written about is at all new. It's not an innovation. It seems innovative only because we've got a collective amnesia in the Protestant church in the West of the first 1600 years of how the church saw God in the world. So it was sort of my attempt at doing that, and just saying, hey, you can, like, this is a story you can be part of. Like, you can learn from my ignorance and my pain and my struggle, but also to say, like, hey, your pain is redemptive too, and in that place you can discover something profound. And so beholding was my attempt at that, and I am deeply grateful that it has connected with people. Like, it's just, I don't think I hate the whole sort of Americanized thing of like, oh, I went through this and now it's all redeemed because I wrote a book about it, and I can spend the rest of my life. I don't think writing a book and it being meaningful kind of justifies the pain,
No.
but it's certainly like a beautiful fruit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that is something that can come out of pain. I guess that's the whole fruit in the valley thing again.
Yeah.
It's not just my soul that's most fruitful in the valley, or yours, or whoever's listening. Like, we actually get to bear fruit for others to eat of when we go through suffering, and that's a gift too. So yeah, that's beholding.
Oh, I love that whole idea of, well, for a start, that faith shifts. A lot of what you're talking about is, this is what I believed. I then experienced things that did not fit with that, and I allowed my beliefs to change as God led me on a journey. And I think sometimes we're really afraid of what that could mean.
Yeah.
If we unbox God,
Yep.
and I mean, churches are afraid of what that means for people.
Yep.
You start getting conversations about the slippery slope that
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all this other language around it of, oh, well, if you go down that route with that thing, and I mean, my experience is that asking those questions and being open to the answer being different to what I've experienced or been taught, probably is a better way of putting it. If my experiences are driving me to challenge those questions, or challenge those answers, where I've come to is actually a deeper reality and a deeper faith, and a place where God is less judgmental and more loving, and I'm called to do less but to be more, and I mean, for me, this whole journey that you've been on, like you say, it's not a journey you might have chosen.
Oh, heck no.
There's a whole lot of really hard stuff about it. So we're not trying to glorify the pain, but the fruit that's coming from it is just beautiful. And I love that you're then going, well, let's, share that with people, whether it's prayers or whether it's the kind of theology that's behind that of where's that come from. And now you've got another one coming. And as this episode drops, it'll be just over a week until the book's out on 1st of October. Thirsting, quenching our soul's deepest desire. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, again, it's probably a book that's come out of more pain in my life. Moved to Tairua, and just experienced a massive detox from the stimulation of city. Like moved to Tairua in COVID, lost my touring life for 2 years because of the border closure, got sick, lost all my friends, lost cafes, music, arts, everything. Dead of winter, cold, quiet. And I think in the midst of that, when I was sick in Auckland, I still could go sit in a cafe or go to a retreat center and be around others and environment change. When I got sick down here, I could do none of that. And what I discovered was there was a powerful, deep, forceful desire in me that I couldn't tame. I tried to put it away. I started to tell myself, look, I'm going to be sick for the rest of my life. Just don't hope for anything better. Don't hope for a better family life. Don't hope for a music career. Don't hope for whatever. On the other hand, I ran and I'll just watch more Netflix, just tune out, just numb it, just anything to get rid of this pain. And so I began a journey instead of like, okay, this desire, God has given it to me. What am I going to do with that? Like, what does it actually live to live in the ache of the longing of human existence? And so that's what thirsting is. It's my attempt at saying, hey, to be a human is to thirst. It actually doesn't matter what it's for. All of us have this longing for love, for security, for meaning. What does God have to offer that? How do we understand that in the gospel as a Christian? And really, it kind of goes to this place of vulnerability. It goes to this place of, Jesus stood up in the marketplace and said this: "If anyone's thirsty, come to me and drink." And I would beg to argue that most people don't know how to do that. And by most people, I don't mean I mean Christians. I don't think most Christians fundamentally actually know what it's like to be satisfied in God. And we live in a world that is like monetizing and capitalizing on our desire left, right, and center. So we're like in the trenches of World War One, and we don't even know how to fire a gun. It's kind of what I'm saying. Do you know what I mean? That's not a great image. I just came off the top of my mind, but that's probably a very negative image. But maybe like we're just in the desert and we don't know how to find the oasis of God. Yeah. And so this book is really like, okay, what is thirst? What is human desire? Does God even know what that feels like? Like, who is God that He made? Like, does God desire? And then, okay, how do I start to actually satisfy myself in God? Not in some vague, ethereal way, but in a day-by-day experiential, I need this, because I got to the point where it's like, God, you are either needed to satisfy me or I'm going to implode, because I cannot change my circumstances. I cannot move city. I cannot be not sick. I can't push away these desires. So you either need to satisfy me or it's game over here. I'm going to become an alcoholic or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to lose it. And I found Him to meet my desires. So thirsting is about that. And really, it's about making sense of what desire is in a world that has everything to say about it and no actual truth really to offer, I think, outside of just do whatever you feel like, which is basically like you do you, It's actually not salvation, man. Like, I don't know, man. There's actually research has shown that people are actually depressed by having too many opportunities, that they don't like options. And I think a lot of people feel anxious and depressed because they think they have to just figure it out. And I think God wants to free us from that. And so, anyways, that's a big diatribe. I've got to work on my elevator pitch, but that's thirsting. It's based on the St. Augustine, who said, God thirsts that we would thirst for Him. So it's an invitation to understand that.
Well, that's beautiful. There's so much more that you and I can talk about. I love all of this conversation. We do need to wrap it up. I'll make sure in the show notes I put connections for people to be able to find you. You as well as your books. You've got prayer courses that you offer, and you're doing spiritual direction, a whole bunch of other things. And to be honest, I just want to say, when I look back at that guy that came and said, how do I do this thing? I'm just really proud of you and your journey that you've been on.
Thanks, man.
It's so beautiful to see the shifts and the way you've responded to the challenges. I think we all have challenges, but it's the way that we respond that creates the fruit. That the flourishing is possible, but we have to accept that invitation, and you did, and you've shared a bit about that with us. I hope that people that have found this captivating will go and read your books and hear more of that and be able to support you in that way as well. Because again, you're not in this for the money, so it'd be nice if you could get some. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and chatting with me,
bro. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you for offering your prayers. I think it would have been so easy for you to keep those to yourself, and yet they've been such a blessing to so many. And yeah, just thank you for the way that you're embodying this way of being that is a challenge to us. And I look forward to seeing where this journey keeps going, because there's as you will well attest to, there's still learning to do, and there's more to come. And so you haven't arrived. That's not even really a thing with God. It's about journeying with
I
God.
feel more like a baby than ever, man.
So so thank you for what you're doing to bring a bit of heaven down to earth.
Thank you, my friend, and thank you for this conversation and the way you host conversation. I really appreciate it, brother. Yeah.
Hello, hello, heaven. Well, I hear you whisper to come near. With all this vain ambition, well, it clouds the mind and dulls the ears. And all this revelation falls like oil down Aaron's beard. And in this age of information, you're the only one that I find real. You're the only one that I find real. That I find real.
There is something deeply enriching about the faith of someone who has been through something that has shaken the core of what they believed, but who has taken that as an invitation into a new way of being. Strahan accepted that invitation, and we are all better off for it. So Strahan, thank you for who you are and for what you do. Here is a blessing for you. Strahan, may you and your whānau continue to grow together in life and love, flourishing in the community in which you live and bringing life to those around you. May your valleys continue to bear much fruit, not just for you, but for all those with whom you share your life, through relationship, through your writing, your songs, your retreats, and your speaking. May you look fondly on those mountaintop experiences and the goodness there was in those times. And may the people you met along the way be blessed for having connected with you. May your books continue to find an audience with those who are thirsty, those who long for a deeper faith than what they've been offered in their churches. And may they be encouraged to find their own ways of journeying with God in the midst of whatever life brings them, in a way that brings them alive. May your health improve and your strength return. But even if they don't, may you know God's strength and wholeness in you, leading you on in this path you are walking. Lastly, may you know you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thanks so much once again to Strahan for the use of his music, and thanks to Rangi for the karakia. Join me next time for one of the most important conversations I think I've ever had on the podcast. It's going to be a bit of a longer episode as I talk to Cole Yeoman about his recent time spent in Palestine. Cole is a visual journalist, capturing in photo and video stories that we all need to hear. We talk about why he headed to one of the more dangerous places on earth to be at the present time, what he spent his time doing there. Most importantly, Cole shares the stories of many of the Palestinian people he met and highlights their resilience, but also paints a picture for us of what life is really like for them. We talk about what we can do from so far away, what hope there is for Palestinians, and how we can be a part of helping them find some. It's a very important kōrero that is sure to leave you challenged. Until then, me enoi tātou.
E tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tau mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Homai kia mātou ai nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā. Mura o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga, e hara ana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea, kia whakawaia. Engari whakaorangi a mātou I te kino.